we're just covering all our bases here. That's what we're doing. We saw ourselves the departure of Kyle Dubas a few days ago from the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we're still kind of in the process of reviewing everything, talking about all the unturned stones, and bringing up all the different implications that this move has to offer. And this one right here is probably the most dire. Let's head over to what Elliotte Friedman talked about on the recent edition of the 32 Thoughts podcast, because on the show, of course, they're talking about the fallout, the backlash, the aftermath of Kyle Dubas' departure as well. And I know we did have ourselves a Dubas, not press conference, a statement, from Dubas and his family on Twitter earlier today. I didn't really think it was worth it to go out there and talk about it, but I guess we can go over that at the end of the video if we still have some time. But Elliotte Friedman went out there and provided pretty much the worst update possible for anybody that was seriously considering Auston Matthews to be a Toronto Maple Leaf for the long term. Now, this is what he said, the tweets from NHL Watcher, as always. Friedman on 32 Thoughts Pod, I did have one player reach out to me and say that they weren't even sure Matthews would have signed by July 1st with Dubas. Because if they made big changes around the draft, the question would become, how would Matthews feel about that? But this player told me, this is one of the players on the team, Friedman said, he said to me they would have been very confident, like last year, Pastrnak with Boston. The Bruins didn't trade him. They believed he wanted to be a Bruin and eventually got it done. The player that talked to Friedman thinks that's what the Leafs would have done. If Matthews didn't sign with Dubas there, they would have kept him and they believe they would have gotten it done. Now, nobody is really sure. So that's obviously the biggest story. And yeah, cue the panic attacks, baby. This is what's going on in Toronto. Now that Kyle Dubas is gone, the entire sentiment that says that Auston Matthews may or may not have signed is even worse now. It was already up in the air when Dubas was there. So now that he is gone and you're having to wait for another guy to be brought in, another person who has a different vision and sort of a different view on how the team is run is going to be brought in, and you're going to have yourselves even more stress because we don't know if Auston Matthews is going to be on board with whatever it is the vision of the next GM is going to be. And Elliotte Friedman's going out there very early on into the summer and saying, yeah, this is a thing. A player on the team told him this. And so now the question becomes, does Matthews actually decide to go? Or not he decides to go per se, but do the Leafs actually trade Matthews away? There is sort of an interesting conversation brought up with the Boston David Pastrnak point here, essentially saying that if Dubas was there, the Maple Leafs would have been really confident, even if Matthews didn't sign the extension right away, so they would have been interested in keeping him around and maybe signing him some way part through the season. If you go over to David Pastrnak and you look for his extension, let's go ahead and do that. David Pastrnak extension. When was that signed? Boston Bruins signed Pastrnak to an 8-year extension, March 2nd, 2023. So it took Pasta until like the 3/4 way of the year, or let's say 4/5 way of the year, to sign his extension. And for Auston Matthews, the Maple Leafs would have been super confident, had Dubas still been there, that they could have done the same thing. But now, it's a little bit different because, as we had said, new GM, new personnel, new vision, so all of a sudden, there's no more guarantee that Matthews would have liked the organization enough to have been willing to stick around and maybe drag the process out until March. We also had ourselves a Frank Seravalli hit on TV yesterday, where he essentially said the same thing, that Matthews and Dubas were very close, and now this sort of ups the percentage odds that Matthews is not going to be a Maple Leaf long-term. We had already talked about the idea of him leaving the organization and going somewhere else in free agency, Arizona, some other Western team like LA or San Jose or the Golden Knights, goodness forbid. So this conversation has gotten bigger now. It's a thing now. Ever since Dubas' departure, there is a lot of controversy as to whether or not the Maple Leafs have what it takes to re-sign a guy like Matthews. And, as we had talked about in the prior video, you got William Nylander in there too. This is sort of a catastrophe type of situation waiting to happen. If you have yourselves Johnny Gaudreau, John Tavares 2.0 with both Matthews and Nylander at the same time, I mean, the Maple Leafs could be very, very screwed. And I don't really feel good about saying that, even though I'm a Canucks fan. You know, I'm not supposed to like the Maple Leafs. I'm supposed to see happiness whenever they go through misfortune. But seriously, dude, That very real possibility is all that a lot of people are thinking about now. Matthews could be gone. Nylander could be gone. You've got Marner coming up in a few years. Tavares, same thing. I mean, you've got Riley signed to a long-term deal. At least that's good. But aside from that, this Maple Leaf squad, with the departure of Dubas, everything seems to be falling down in shambles. And I know we had talked the entire talk about Dubas and the way he left and Shanahan's comments, etc., etc. I'm not going to go out there and say that Dubas still should have been the GM, but learning about all of the changes afterwards, I'm not surprised in one respect, but at the same time, it is kind of shocking just seeing everything come out at once, seeing the wave of information and conversations about this. Let's go over onto the hockey news, because what Rachel Dory did was she wrote a piece talking about the Maple Leafs parting ways with Dubas and how this rings alarm bells. It's a very intriguing perspective from somebody that did work at MLSE in the past. The article was published yesterday. The link is going to be in the description. If you go over to what she says about Auston Matthews, it's at the end of the article, so let's go ahead and read this. From a human standpoint, Kyle Dubas led a forward-thinking, positive culture. It's rare in hockey that not a single person within an organization has a bad thing to say about somebody. When Jason Spezza resigns and Auston Matthews might no longer be sure about signing an extension, it speaks to how well-respected Dubas is. He's earned that loyalty. If the decision to show Dubas the door ends with Matthews following, the blame should lie squarely with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment's board, who will have cost them millions of dollars by allowing the most talented player in franchise history to walk because they wouldn't allow his boss to make the decisions he was hired to make. One thing is for sure, though, the money that MLSE will cost themselves if Matthews leaves is far greater than the money Dubas asked for. No doubt about that. In the end, last week may go down as the one that plunged the Toronto Maple Leafs back into chaos over what seems to be a couple $1,000,000 and boardroom drama. That seems quite ridiculous when the ownership group is worth nearly $100 billion, but I guess this is what real-life succession is. Now, obviously, that's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it kind of goes out there and shows that, yeah, there are some potentially very, very real consequences to this entire thing going down. And for Matthews, this is no longer a conversation about his future and where he goes and this and that. It's about the Maple Leafs. It's about the direction, it's about what they do next, and it's about what they can do to hopefully entice a guy like Matthews to stick around, because he was on board with Dubas' vision. He was here because of Dubas' vision. We can and we will. They could and they did. They did re-sign all those guys. Dubas had to go through a pandemic where the cap didn't go up, and he still was hardball on the players that he was committed to, and he got it done. I'm not going to say he was the best GM in the world, but for what the Maple Leafs were promised, Dubas delivered. It's just the success on the ice. One round, Florida, second round, it was really bad. That's on the players, not really on the GM. But either way, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your opinions about Auston Matthews' chances of leaving Toronto being a much higher rate now than it had been this time a week ago, or this time 2 weeks ago? Whenever anybody was talking about Matthews getting extended, it was always, okay, we gotta wait, he's gonna sign the extension. Same with Nylander, it's gonna be a done deal, Dubas is gonna get it done because we can and we will, boom, let's go. Now, it's not like that anymore. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Matthews, the Maple Leafs, the direction, and where the future lies in Matthews' career. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj 99, and bye.